Hey folks, Jake Schneider here with Life as an Outsider. I'm sitting here in a conference room with my good friend John Claes. He's a playwright in the Des Moines area. John, how are you doing today, my
I'm
friend?
doing fantastic. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Thank you for being on. So, John and I have been in one play together here at Ankeny. We were in A Few Good Men together. And one of the cool things about that was just getting to know you and getting to know your passion for the craft. But then shortly afterwards, I would say, and by shortly I mean a couple years because COVID kind of killed everything, I get a text from John saying, hey, I wrote this play and I've got you in mind for this part. That play ended up being The Perfect Rendezvous, which we performed, gosh, what was that, 2 years ago?
It was August of 2021, yeah.
Yeah, that was it was a wild time. I was going through a lot of change, and then we ended up doing that, and it was a blast. So tell us a little bit about The Perfect Rendezvous for those that weren't able to attend, and then we'll talk a little bit about your playwriting career.
Yeah, we're going to back up a couple of years. I was on the board. I've been involved with the Ankeny Community Theater for over 20 years. A board member, and one year they had me fundraising chair, and they asked me to chair a dinner theater project with a winery in Cambridge, and we selected a play, and we produced it, and it was successful. But the kicker was I wrote the play for this dinner theater because the dynamics of where the event was to be held, the owner of the property said the play needs to be like this and set here, and I thought, wow, I can't find a play that's been written that checks all the boxes. So I told my wife, I said, I could write a play, right? I'm a clever guy. And she said, sure. So in about 6 weeks, I wrote a play. We cast it, and we did it in this. And the kicker was this play was set inside a restaurant. So to do a dinner theater at a large banquet room, I'll just write it like we're in the middle of a restaurant. So that was the stage. I didn't have to worry about a complicated stage build or anything like that. So then after the success of that, I started thinking, okay, I'm going to start writing the one for the next year. And I thought I'm going to write another play set in a restaurant. The Perfect Rendezvous is a good part of it is set in a nice restaurant that I called the Overlook, and a couple of seeds leading up to that. So I began writing this play, and then COVID hit. Didn't happen, but I continued to write it. And as I was writing the role of TJ, I had you in mind the entire time. We met doing A Few Good Men, and I thought you'd be perfect for this. In fact, as you're writing a play, some playwrights do this. As you read a book, Jake, you probably often picture what actor would be in this role. That makes it a little easier to remember that particular character from chapter to chapter. So I wrote it with you in mind, and COVID had hit, and all theater shut down. And I was on the board of the Ankeny Theater at the time, and we, tried to set a season for the coming months, and we thought, well, we're not ready, so we kind of were dark for, better than a year. Ankeny announced its next season, and then when the CDC lifted its requirements, we as a board were thinking, oh my goodness, our first show wasn't going to start until October. Had we known when they were going to lift the restrictions, we could have started the season a couple months earlier. And I said, well, I have this little play that I had cast, you in it. We had a couple of Zoom read-throughs just to humor me, and I'd say to you on these Zooms, I'd love for this play to be produced someday. I don't know if and when that might happen, but I had the great opportunity. Ankeny had a spot in their season. I said, let's squeeze this in. We didn't need much time to rehearse. It was a smaller show. And it was successful, and it was so much fun. I'd been in fact, our show together, A Few Good Men, it was the 18th time I had appeared on the Ankeny stage.
Oh, wow.
And I had been backstage for other productions too, but that's the last time I had been on stage there. And now my passion is in writing content and hopefully finding stages subsequent to that. So The Perfect Rendezvous was a comedy, and it's nice to write something you think is funny and then have the audience actually confirm that with their laughter and the great response that we got. And it's about a young girl that's introducing her boyfriend to her parents, and particularly her father, who was very, very critical of all of her boyfriends. And she said, I'm gonna introduce TJ to my parents at this nice restaurant on Friday night, and I need everything to go just right. she calls a local radio personality, an advice columnist, if you will, who tells her, these are all the things you need to do to have TJ impress your father. What she doesn't know is that her father happens to be listening to that radio broadcast. So he hears his daughter on the air, and through one mix-up or another, he thinks he's the person that needs to impress the other, and it creates a bit of a madcap scenario. And I thought it was a funny way to present it, and I know you agreed, and the audience did as well.
It was so fun to be able to be in a play that one of your friends had written. And I think that's one of the coolest things about it was, we've done things like A Few Good Men. We've had so many stage plays. There's so many adaptations of Shakespeare. But to actually get to know somebody that has put the whole play together, put everything into words, it was a blast. It really was. And the cast itself, partly due to the fact that we had about, it must have been at least 6 months plus of doing a Zoom read-through every now and then for fun. It really contributed to the closeness that we all had, I believe.
Yeah, and getting feedback from each and every one of you guys. So each time we'd get together, the play read a little different than it had the time before. I added characters from one read-through to the next just because I thought there was a need for it. And so I would introduce another character at the next Zoom, and everybody meet this actress, and she's going to be a part of our play. And again, I hope everyone was thinking that would be great, because all of us missed being performers. I mean, we missed live audiences. We missed theater, both as a patron and a participant. So I knew there was a willingness on everybody's behalf. I just prayed that when we had a stage and a time to produce it, everyone would be available. And I was so lucky that everybody was able to work it into their schedule. And it was just one of the thrills of my life.
It was absolutely fantastic. And even just talking to those who were involved in your dinner theater as well, they all had a blast. I think of Joe and Allie. I miss them dearly. I haven't seen them in so long, but I think of people like that it was such a blast to do things like that. And even A Few Good Men. I mean, we'll start back there, because for me, I'd acted in high school, but I hadn't acted since then. My sister-in-law is very involved in the performing arts in the Des Moines area, and so for me, I hadn't been in a play in at least 5 or 6 years. And as soon as I jumped into Ankeny Community Theater, I was welcomed with open arms. And the cast with that one as well, I mean, it was really funny. So if you've seen the movie, I played the Kiefer Sutherland character.
Mm-hmm. Kendrick.
That's right. And John, I can't remember who you were in the movie, but you played
Captain Markinson.
That's right.
That was me, the guy who offs himself, unfortunately. So
I remember one of the first nights we were auditioning together. If you don't know, I'm really good at being smug and coming off as just kind of narcissistic, and especially when I'm called to act that way, it's really fun. But I remember one night there was something where I had said something on stage. It was in the play, and you turn around and you go, "Wipe that smirk off your face," and and I didn't, and he kind of stopped. We had a lot of fun doing that, and I think back on that time very fondly, and the relationships that were formed in that. And I love to see that your passion for theater has continued to grow, and it sounds like you are continuing to write. One thing I want to shout out is every Christmas, you and Anne, your wife, who is also fantastic. We all love Anne. In fact, one of the reasons I love your wife so much is the cookies that she makes.
Chocolate chip cookies.
They're fantastic.
No substitute.
Every Christmas, you and your wife do something special, or at the end of every show, you've done some special musical number. Where did that idea come from?
I think I can go back to when I was in high school. Just for fun, I would write these novelty song parodies like Weird Al or Randy Rainbow. If some of you know, he's a more contemporary satirist who does music videos. So I've done them as long as I can remember. And now I do them every year. Instead of a Christmas card that I used to personalize and send to friends, now we produce a Christmas music video. So every year I'm already starting to think, what am I going to do as a parody for this Christmas? I'll take maybe the hot song of the summer or something like that. But I've probably been doing them since 2000. early 2000s, we would get together as a family for Christmas, and sometimes I would parody a Christmas carol or something that everybody knows, and then it began more parodying contemporary songs. So, and I'm blessed to have a nephew who's a great videographer, and he's lent his expertise and his passion, and we produce some, I think, pretty quality. I have a YouTube channel, just as you do, Jake, John Claes. You can search. There's probably over 40 videos that I've done for special occasions and Christmas and birthdays and things like that. So, it's the ability to do those right, clever parodies that gave me the confidence to say I can probably write a play. I can probably write a comedy. Sometimes I'm a little. Now in particular, when I see a play, I'll think, I think I could have written that better, or this part redder, and you just get maybe a little smug. You talk about being smug, and I got to say, going back to A Few Good Men, I was so impressed with you, and having been involved with the Ankeny Theater for so long, I haven't missed a production in almost 20 years, and then I love it when we come to auditions or I see a show and then I see a new face, and I say, that person impressed me, I hope they come back, they have a talent that should be shared over and over again. And I made sure of it when I cast you in the play that I wrote for you in mind, which I love doing that too, by the way.
It was an absolute blast, and it was really fun. And I think back on your song that you did, a parody of "It's Raining Men." You did "A Few Good Men." And
oh, that's right.
Oh my goodness, that one, it cracked me up for days.
Yeah, what I was doing is, whether it was on a show I was in, or if I directed it, or had something to do even with the crew, my little thank you to the cast, I would do a song parody at the cast party and perform it. I forgot about that one. Some of those I don't have immortalized by video and posted to my YouTube channel, but I was doing a video series on my YouTube channel called Hold for Applause, and the notion was we're without theater because of COVID, so I'm going to take that time, and I dug up some of those song parodies that I had written and then actually perform them to an orchestra track, and I would maybe do a slideshow. And I got about 5 plays into that, and there's a lot of them, because I kept thinking, how could I possibly do Few Good Men? And some of the language in that maybe isn't appropriate for that. So
I believe that's why it was not immortalized in video, if I remember
probably
right.
So
It did crack me up, though. I mean, we had such talents like Allie Kerwin, who... if you've seen the movie, Kevin Bacon's character, we gender swapped her, and she did an absolute fantastic job as whatever the name was. I can't think of the actual names of the characters.
Jack, the character was Jack, played by Kevin Bacon, and I don't know I think we called her Jackie. But yeah, that was an amazing cast, and again, you coming in from nowhere, it seemed to me. Still an Ankeny guy. I don't know what inspired you to audition for that play, because I don't know if you had ever been to a show at the Ankeny Community Theater, but you were a perfect Kendrick. I mean, you have to be straight-laced. You need to be Bible in hand. This is the way things are going to be, true to the core and to my faith. And you even agreed, as all of us males in the cast, we had to agree to go to a place and get a military buzz cut for that. And I'm a little vain, like most are. You couldn't pull it. I don't know if you take the role today, Jake, looking at your lovely locks, but we had to get our buzz cut. And we had to wear our boots, and we had a great costumer, and the demands of that play to do it on a set at the Ankeny, for any of you who know, it was a job, but we pulled it off, absolutely.
Absolutely, and I remember our director, Michael, I showed up with my flat top I don't know, we may have done dress rehearsals. It was the first week of dress rehearsals, and I was like, I'm getting into character, and all I did was yell at people. It was pretty great. It was really
great.
Fun.
You were so good at that.
Tell me a little bit about the playwriting process. You've talked about doing those song parodies. Where does that creativity come from? I mean, has that always been instilled in you?
I think my creativity was always encouraged when I was a little kid. I think the first play I was in was maybe in first or second grade. I loved writing. In fact, it gets to the point where I think it aggravates my wife a little bit. Sometimes I come home and I just fire up my laptop and we're watching TV and I'm multitasking. And Jake, I'm always writing something. I'm writing my next song parody, or I'm rewriting. In fact, The Perfect Rendezvous was performed in August of 21. And actually, I wrote one song. I'm a musical guy, too. So I wrote one song, and I plucked it in the middle of that show when it was welcome and a great addition to that. And I have a musician friend, Kevin, and he worked with me on that. And when the play got done, Kevin said, "Johnny, what's next? We're working together, doing good things here." So I decided The Perfect Rendezvous is going to be a full 2-act musical. I'm about a year away from realizing that, but I've been writing music. It's not tedious; it takes time. And anyway, I'm constantly tweaking to do that. I've written a show called A Gift for Rebecca. I wrote this a couple of years ago to be a Christmas show. I pitched it to the Ankeny Community Theater. It's one thing for The Perfect Rendezvous to be stuck in 2021 when they had space on their season when they lifted the COVID restrictions. It's another thing to say, okay, among all the shows you can pick for an established season, here's a show I'd like you to consider that I've written. And they have the confidence in me, and it's placed on it's going to be the December show of 2023 this year, so I'm excited. But that play, I wrote it like 2 years ago, but every night I'm rewriting it. I'm punching it up. I've had a Zoom read through with some friends of mine, get feedback. So it's always writing because you want it to get perfect. And you don't know if it's a perfect until you present it to an audience. And even after we do that, after I wrote The Perfect Rendezvous, I did some marketing to community theaters in the state saying, you can rent your shows and pay for the royalties from other companies, or you can do this one for free. I just want it produced a second time. There was a theater interested, and I had to rewrite it to fit more of their accommodations. They weren't able to produce it as they had hoped, but I have 3 things I'm constantly tweaking, and it's just what I love to do in my spare time. It's great.
It's really cool, and that's part of the reason that I wanted to have you on as well, was to talk about this December play that's coming up. So just curious, did you write this one or The Perfect Rendezvous first?
I wrote The Perfect Rendezvous first.
Awesome. So tell me a little bit about this Christmas play that you're going to be putting on. Is this the first time this one's been produced, or has it been produced before?
Has not. I just started thinking, what's going to be my next play? And I thought, I'm going to write a Christmas play, because I know, I'm not currently on the board at Ankeny, but sometimes to do a December show, you want it to be a Christmas show. It doesn't have to be, but there's kind of a limit to the number of times you could do the shows everyone's heard of or other things. So knowing that was kind of a limitation, I thought, well, I'm going to write a Christmas show. And the thought I had was, Santa's going to retire. What would that look like? How would he go about that, and how would the North Pole operate after he's retired? So that was my first thought about it. So I just started writing. Probably the Christmas carols were still playing on the radio, so it was around Christmas time. And my process is usually, it takes maybe a couple of months. And Jake, here's what I love, my favorite thing about writing. I'll have a certain plot in mind, certain characters in mind. But just as when you read, let's say, a novel, you're glued to that book. You keep turning the page because you want to know what happens next, right? Honestly, sometimes when I write, I don't know what's going to happen next. I'll come up with a thread of dialogue, and I thought, it'll be funny if I take it here, and then I'll introduce another character. I'm thinking, well, I got to flesh out that character a little bit more. So the end product is never what I have by design in my head, and that's one of the things I love about it. Going back to The Perfect Rendezvous, for me, it feels like a play when I think I've written it and I get a logo that I can put on the front page. I have a buddy. He's a very talented artist, Blair. Shout out to Blair Gaunt. And I gave him an overview of what The Perfect Rendezvous was about. And he gave me a logo design. And in the logo, it featured a kind of a frantic waitress just running, and, she's in stride with a plate on her hand. And I said, I like that, but I didn't write a part for a waitress other than a server, other than someone who just, no lines, just comes in and maybe calls on TJ or whatever. And I thought, well, now I got to write a part for a waitress. And I created such a delightful character that I thought, how could this play have been written without this wacky waitress? and it just added a lot of fun to it. It's already a comedy, but just added a little bit more lunacy to it, I would say. So anyway, so back to the Christmas show. So I started I'd write about a Santa Claus who wasn't quite ready to retire. He's invited to look at the North Pole operation that's going to continue in his absence, and he's not impressed with how the advances in technology and how big their facility is. And he walks by a mailroom where he just sees these letters to Santa Claus are being delivered to the North Pole, but they're scanned, they're barcoded, and they're filed, and no one reads them. And he nonchalantly grabs a few letters, and he reads one of a young girl who's in foster care, who's very unhappy and feels unloved and out of place, and she just writes Santa, and in the letter she says, I don't believe in you. I'm smart enough to know there's no such thing as Santa Claus, but I need to believe in something. So for this year, I just want to feel like I belong. I'm getting chills just thinking about it. So Santa decides that I need to make one last mission, and his Mrs. Claus says, I'm with you, and he recruits his stable hand of many, many years who took care of his reindeer. The three of them are going to go to Grand Rapids, Michigan to deliver a gift to one girl in foster care, who, by the way, is in a loving home, but she just doesn't feel like she deserves it. So that's kind of the premise. So it's my first, it's still a comedy. There's a lot of wackiness that goes in. Some of the people taking over the North Pole operation, there's some inept people there, and we spy on a call center where the Santas, there's over 1,000 recruited to take Santa's place, but they're calling in with issues with pets that were unregistered, and I can't get by the security to this house. But the help center is there to help them. But those are pretty inept people, and there's some comedy there. So it's just I think it's a touching show with a lot of heart, and it's going to be a lot of fun, and I can't wait. And the frustrating thing is we won't do this for 6 or 7 months, and it's like, what am I going to do in that time? All I can do is think about, again, making it better, finding people. Hopefully it's going to require that I cast a couple of young girls, which is going to be the challenge, but I've got plenty of time to find them. So
I'm really excited to see what that show brings and how that comes about. One of the things I wanted to ask you is, as a writer, who do you think of as somebody that's had influence on you, whether indirectly or directly, as somebody who's in their writing process?
Boy, that's a good question. I don't think I try to write like anybody. I admire people. Karen Schaefer is a local. I've been in shows with Karen. She's also a successful playwright, so I've gone to her as kind of a mentor to help me. And one thing I don't do is I say, read my play and give me feedback. I don't want to do that. I think that's, I don't want to put them in that awkward position, but I consider her a mentor. Tommy Lee Johnston is a playwright out of Chicago who was an actor who gave up that passion to be a playwright, and it just so happened that Ankeny has done, I think, 3 of his plays. And when Ankeny chose to do his play, a second play, he couldn't ignore it, and he says, I'd like to come to Ankeny and see a production of your play, and then I'll stick around for a talkback. And so he's come at least twice for Ankeny Productions, and I've had a chance to get to know him, and he's been a mentor as well. And again, not to read my stuff, but just make suggestions on how I might get something produced. And I have actors and friends that are, a good friend of mine sent me a podcast the other day to listen to about helping getting your show produced, which is a dream of anybody's. But one thing I know, Jake, is I think the show can be good and we'll get it produced, but I need to get it produced a second time by a theater not in my hometown, somebody that I have no ins with like I do at the Ankeny Community Theater. So I'm trying to market my plays and market me as a playwright. I probably don't do it that hard enough, but a dream would be to be in the audience to see a play I've produced, done by somebody that I don't know, with people I don't know. With the director, I had no choice but to trust to put that show on. That's one thing. The only shows I've ever directed are shows that I've written, because you think I know this show best. It's a part of me. My DNA is in it, and I want to be the one to help bring it to a stage. So, no immediate plans to have it produced. Not that I won't try. I can probably get it self-produced, and there's some small publishing houses that I can probably just submit it online and take my chances. But I want it to be a little more prestigious than that. So we'll see. I'm patient. I've got time, and we'll see what happens.
I'm really excited to stick around and see what happens. John, I have always appreciated our conversations, whether it's on stage or off, and just getting to know you and Ann, and just the joy that I've seen in your life and the joy that you bring to my life through your passion for writing is an inspiration to me as well. And I commend you on continuing to, find that passion and pursue it. It doesn't matter if it was in your 20s or if it's now. You have found a passion and you're pursuing that, and I commend you on that. Not many people are doing that.
And I've been listening to your podcast, Jake, and the connective tissue with so many of them is passion for people to serve their communities and to be heard and have a positive effect on people through their work or their service. And I remember when you told me some time ago, I'd love for you to be a guest on my podcast, and I'm thinking, how do I fit into that? But I realize that connective tissue is I'm so passionate about this. I love to write. I love to share my gift with others, and I appreciate your friendship and the invitation to be a part of your podcast. It's just a highlight for me. Thank you.
It's been a highlight for me as well, John. Thank you very much for taking the time to be an outsider with us. I greatly appreciate it.
Proud to be one.
And folks, make sure to keep an eye out on Ankeny Community Theater for the shows that they're putting on, including A Gift for Rebecca. We're also looking forward to seeing what happens with A Perfect Rendezvous. It's a show that I truly do treasure, being such an integral part of it, and I am honored to have been thought of from the start. But this has been a blast. I thoroughly thank John for taking the time to be an outsider with us. And as always, thank you for being an outsider with us. Be kind to each other.